Very good. Good evening. Thank you, Nick and Michael, for joining us this evening to talk about compassionate release. Nicolay Middlebrook, Nick, is the Director of Operations at the Center for Structural Equity, where he has worked for 3 years. Prior to this role, he served as a program director for an inpatient drug treatment program and as an executive officer for a local NAACP. Michael Bartley is a paraprofessional and behavioral specialist at Warner Elementary School. He's also the founder of Heads Up 302, an organization geared towards awakening and enlightening the people to the truth of the many hidden deceptions and other misguidance that surrounds us daily. And in his spare time, he is vice president of Home Team's Chosen Ones, HTCO, a fairly new but very impactful statewide organization and movement anchored by formerly incarcerated men and women as true agents of change in Sussex, Kent, and Newcastle counties. And for those of you who were with us when Yasser Payne spoke, I'll note that they are also both streetcar associates working on the Got the Hammer on Me project. So with that, I will turn it over to Michael and Nick.
All right. Yeah, so I guess I'll open up. Yeah, so lots been going on surrounding the compassionate release here in the state of Delaware. Me and Nick, we spent a lot of time together. Ironically, we actually went to elementary school together. So Nick went off to college and he did a lot of the good things, the right things in life. So I ended up taking the wrong turn and ended up in Smyrna doing some time for different crimes or whatever. And so Nick, as years went by, I'm talking about 25, maybe 30 years almost. Since we had seen each other. So it went from the schoolyard, unfortunately, to the prison yard, where we ended up with each other again. So that's where our story started at. We spent a lot of time down there. Nick had a lot of time, more time than me. So we just had conversations, man, around things. He was frustrated, of course, because he had a life sentence, and I just try to keep him motivated. Like, Nick, man, we got to just do some things. So Nick, took it upon himself, man, to go into the law library and really, dig deep and find, loopholes in his case. But during that time, we was around so many other inmates, older inmates that we're talking about that were down there who had natural life sentences. And they had already been incarcerated for 30 years, most of them. So you can only imagine. So I ended up doing 16 years, and Nick did, I believe, 24 years altogether. So, while we were there, of course, we, like I said, we bonded together. And a lot of those older inmates down there really helped us and guided us, towards making better choices and doing things to try to better ourselves, as opposed to what you hear about older inmates teaching younger inmates how to become better criminals. That's just a cliche and a total lie, especially in Delaware. So we speaking from experience, So me and Nick, like I said, we spent a lot of time. Nick ended up following my lead because I went into the drug treatment program following behind a lot of older guys down there who, convinced us, like, man, you guys got to find y'all's niche, find out who y'all are, find your self-worth and your purpose, And they guided us. They really guided us. Nick, he was kind of stubborn at first, didn't want to do programs, didn't want to do none of that because he was fighting for his life. So I understood that. But he did finally make a choice of going into the drug treatment programs and behavior programs. And me and him became facilitators overnight. We started doing things and started leading by example for the younger inmates and incarcerated. But we were following the older guys, the guys that we're trying to fight to get out now, that's been down 30, 40, 50 years. Just really at this point being warehoused. So, yeah, so I ended up coming home before Nick, a few years before Nick. I've been home going on 8 years now. And it's just been a struggle. It's been a struggle trying to convince people that, guys down there in warehouse, guys have done 25, 30 years. And a lot of it hadn't been for murder or nothing like that. Some of them are just drugs. Some of them are just robbery without somebody getting hurt. But you had a few who murdered people. But everybody, God, whatever God you serve, He forgives. We got a forgiving God. So yeah. So compassionate release. So right now they got on the books, they got it called for medical reasons. You know what I mean? So I guess they're saying if you pretty much on your deathbed, we'll let you out. You know what I mean? That's what it looks like right now. You know what I mean? But things are happening. Things are definitely happening right now. A couple guys has got out here recently. A couple guys, I know a guy,
Michael, your
my cousin actually.
Michael, your microphone's having a little difficulty. It started out fine, and something happened.
Okay, can you hear me clearly now? Maybe because
I'm not sure what
hear me now.
happened. The first couple of minutes were really good, and then it started getting a little.
Okay, y'all hear me now? I probably have to speak up a little more. Can everybody hear me?
It's not the volume. There's some sort of static.
Like static in there.
Yeah.
It's static. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. It might be a lot going on. I'm still in the school. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so I don't know what did it make. Nick, maybe you might have to take over, Nick, and yours might be clearer than mine. So we'll let Nick take over. And I'll try to chime back in. So hopefully you guys can hear me the next time.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nick.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to come here. As like Michael said, our history is long, and we know a lot of these guys personally, and so really, you might ask the question of what is compassionate release, and so compassionate release is really like letting the guys out that have been in jail 35 and 40 years, and a lot of them are in there for non-violent crimes, right? And they've been given life sentences, de facto life sentences. So what we have done, this was a project. So I'm a PAR family member. Mike was also a PAR family member. So we are currently on a project called Got the Hammer on Them, which is a street PAR project. And what is street PAR? Street PAR is Street Participatory Action Research, right? And it's a PAR model that organized street identified populations and persons who are formerly incarcerated to do activism. And so out of our project, we decided to take on and getting some of these guys like Michael was just telling you that were influential in some of our lives, and a lot of other guys, like we said, there's a myth that older guys teach younger guys how to be better criminals, right? A lot of those older guys, like when you meet them down there, if they see you doing anything dumb, they'll snatch you up and teach you, and they'll put you on the road, on the path to change your life, right? And they'll give you a lot of wisdom, especially for a lot of younger guys that are incarcerated that, lacked father figures, lacked positive male role models. So for some guys, younger guys that are just incarcerated, these men have become the only positive influence and positive role model that they have had up to that point in their life. And back in, two people who have been the poster children for this project has been Tyre Payne and Mr. Robert Saunders. Mr. Saunders has been released. What was he, last week, Michael?
Yeah.
The week before? Yes. Yeah, he was released. He served about 40 years. The latest statistics show that there was 785 people incarcerated in Delaware over the age of 50. 187 of those persons incarcerated have 30 years or more. Out of there is 186 males and 1 black female, 79 white males and 107 black males. Their age for most of them is 60 inmates are in their 50s, 92 inmates are in their 60s, and 35 inmates are 70 or older. And 187 inmates over 50 are incarcerated with more than 30 years, right? So the criteria for the compassionate release would be 1, 30 years or more served on your sentence, age 60 or older. You have medical and health challenges, right? You are no threat to public safety. You are a strong potential for being a productive citizen. You have made positive gains while incarcerated, and you have support awaiting upon your release. Back in June, we got together, we had a big meeting, with legislators and many people in the community, and we talked about compassionate relief. A state resolution was drafted up, and it was passed unanimously by the Senate and the House in June 2000, 23. What we're here tonight is we're asking your assistance to get behind us and help us to support this bill, because soon as the legislative session opens, we would like to garner support and have people behind us so we can get this on the governor's desk and get him to sign this and get some of these men who have been in jail for 35, 40 years out of prison. And like I said, to have firsthand knowledge of some of these guys, as Michael was just telling you, like, we know that they're no threat to society. For example, Tyre Payne. Tyre Payne has been in jail for over 40 years. Am I correct, Michael?
50 years. Oh.
He was incarcerated before James T. Vaughan Correctional Center was called James T. Vaughan Correctional Center. I think it was the old workhouse. He was transferred from the old workhouse to Smyrna, right? I think in the 70s, 72, 73, 74, somewhere around there. Mr. Payne is a role model inmate, right? It has been probably for the last 30 years. He's been a part of many programs. He's helped many men get out. Mr. Payne is in jail for an assault second. He was sentenced as a habitual offender. He caught the assault second while he was incarcerated. This is a complete injustice because Mr. Payne has, at the time, assault second carried 0 to 8. The habitual offender law enhances that 8-year sentence that he can be sentenced from 0 to life. So Mr. Payne was given a life sentence that has been in jail for over 50 years for, even though the incident was violence, he admits his wrong, he accepts his responsibility, but it is just a travesty to justice to have a man serve his sentence for, even though there was a victim, that there was no serious physical injury, and it just didn't call for him to serve 50 years. At this point in time, Mrs. Tyre, how old is Tyre? About 70?
He's about 73, 70, yeah.
73, that it's a complete waste of taxpayer money, and it's a complete injustice to his family and to society to have someone like Mr. Payne incarcerated. Like Mr. Bartley said, there is a compassionate release on the books, but it's tied to a medical release, and normally guys are given this when they're on our deathbed. And a lot of these guys have support, right? They have support, they have family members, they have children that would like their family members home, and we believe that, you know, they've worked and they've earned it. Like we live in a society where that, you know, we all stand in need of someone to give us a second chance or another chance, right? And that we believe that these guys deserve this chance, and that we're just asking you to get behind us if you can with your support and help us get a lot of these guys out that deserve that second chance because they've been in jail for over 30 years. Anything you'd like to add to that, Michael?
Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me this time. But yeah, so like I said, those guys really molded and shaped, the way we think, because, I know Ed Fountains. I don't know if you guys ever heard of a guy named Ed Fountain, man. This guy told me, he said, as long as your thoughts, your emotions, and your desires are in order, you know what I mean, you can become anything you want to be in life, man. I remember my cellmate was on death row. And he ended up dying, but he got executed some years ago. And he told me, because I was still young and wild, I was like, I had anticipations on going out and committing crime and doing whatever I needed to do. You know what I mean? Because that's how I was brought up. You know what I mean? This guy took me in that room and sat me down and told me, man, he said, man, don't do it. Be productive, man. And for the 2 years that I was in the cell with this guy, he didn't do nothing but give me positive affirmation, gave me motivation, and he was on his way to his deathbed. You know what I mean? So, that speaks volumes to me. That's why I'm doing the things I'm doing, Nick as well. It's a few of us out here that's really leading that cause of doing change. You know what I mean? We came out here and we hit the ground running. Like, I tell guys I work in the elementary school, they thinking I'm the janitor in here. I'm actually a paraprofessional. You know what I mean? I deal with attitudes, behaviors, with the kids and the parents. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, so we didn't want to leave them guys behind, man. A lot of those guys deserve to come out and have second chances. Someone gave me a second chance. You know, matter of fact, they gave me more than a second chance. I didn't have 3 or 4 chances. You know what I mean? So I'm taking full advantage of it. And it's just, it's a pleasure to be, in the company of people like you guys, that have some influence. That's what it's about. It's about influence. And, first you got to believe in second chances. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we're just asking you guys to get behind us, so those guys can come out here and bring that productivity out here in this. We see what's going on in our world. We need as many positive people as we can get out here in this world right now, and for them to be sitting down there on that, we Paddock Road, so to speak, but not just Paddock Road, all the prisons throughout Delaware. It's just, it's unfair. I think that, those guys should be given a chance to come out.
Yeah. And the second one, Michael, I was saying that, they've served their time. That that's a personal belief, and I'm sure Michael feels that way, and everyone on our street part team and around us feels feels the same way. Them guys have been a stopgap and have been influential in so many people's lives, right? That I could, like, you have Michael and myself here tonight, but we could have lined the room up with 50 or more people who could speak on some of these guys. Mr. Saunders, Mr. Bartley brought up Mr. Ed Fountain, and these guys have been instrumental. I mean, those two, Robert Saunders and Ed Fountain, were instrumental. Robert Saunders, Michael told you, gave you a brief story of how, I litigated my case while I was incarcerated. And Mr. Saunders was instrumental in, I mean, teaching me a lot that goes way past law, way past life. The advice he given me, along with when I got Mr. Bartley just told you about the drug treatment center, and Mr. Ed Fountain, and those two men were instrumental in who I am today, right? And as Mr. Bartley says today, that we hit the ground because of them. We hit the ground running, right? And they put us on a different path. And one of the things we owe to them is to not leave them behind and give them an opportunity to not rot, not die down there in on Paddock Road and at James P. Farm Correctional Center. And so the stories can go on about a lot more guys, but these are the 3 of the guys that we are telling you about: Mr. Payne, Mr. Saunders. Like I said, Mr. Saunders was just recent release, but I mean, Mr. Saunders went through hell basically to get to relief. I mean, he went to the pardon board maybe 3 or 4 times, and each time he was recommended, but the governors didn't sign off. But Mr. Saunders was, I mean, if instrumental in changing many people's lives, getting rules in the institution that were just egregious or harsh and stark. And Mr. Saunders was influential to challenges them. He taught men to basically where you fight with your hands and you have attitudes. He taught us how to think and how to use our pen. I mean, unfortunately, down James T. Vaughn, we had a deadly riot years ago. But I think that without some of these men, that you would have had many different things in the institution, because they played a role in keeping, as Mr. Bartley just said, Michael just said, that they played a role in changing the lives of many young men in jail, right? That changed their path. And like I said, I can't even really do them no justice sitting here speaking to how influential they have been. But only thing I can tell you, I can ask you, is that if you can help garnish your support so that we can help influence our governor to sign this bill and give these men an opportunity to come home and be with their friends, their families, their friends, their loved ones, the community. Because like Mr. Michael just said, this world needs a lot of positive people in there. And, let's put down the myth. A lot of times there's a myth that there's how can I say that there's a gap or between older and younger men. And I think these guys have many wisdom, and they could do a lot out here, you know what I mean, with the wisdom that they have, that they can share in part, even from their children, their grandchildren, to even young people that they run into in the streets. So, that's pretty much all I have. Miss Michael, you have anything else? I mean, we can open it up for any questions for Q&A. If you have any questions for Michael, about the compassionate release bill, just questions in general, like we're open for that one.
I have some questions for you in terms of just the process and where things are. I mean, I know that you guys are already working with the Office of Defensive Services on some of the details and tweaking the language and stuff. But what about in terms of the legislators? Do you know yet who the primary sponsor is going to be? Like, which legislators are you working with at this point?
So Brian Townsend has been the primary sponsor so far. And to give you a quick update that I was updated today, Yash updated me today on that they're meeting with Mr. Payne. Mr. Townsend's law firm is, of course, it's got to go through the process. They're going to represent Tyer pro bono to try to get him out of jail. He and Mr. Townsend is behind the bill. He's the primary sponsor. It passed the House and the Senate unanimously. Now we're just waiting for the governor to pretty much get behind it and sign off. So that's what the process. So we're hoping to start that process as soon as January kicks off, to go straight to the governor and ask the governor to say, hey, this is of great importance. Can you get behind this? Can you sign off on this? And can we get some of these men home?
Marge?
I just want to say thank you for being here. I'm a huge supporter of this bill and of Brian Townsend. So, but I have a couple questions, I guess. You mentioned, I'm wondering how do you identify the people that you think should be released, and who does that identification? But you also mentioned about the people who were incarcerated that were influential in your lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how that could be translated in prison reform. Why is not the prison providing that kind of input? What can we do to encourage that? If you understand my question.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'll start with the criteria process. So the criteria process with the bill would be, I think that you would have to be age 60 or older. You have to have medical and health challenges, no threat to public safety. You have to have been a positive role model inmate while you were in there. And you have to have 30 years or more, and it would go through the process where it would be, I believe the prison would, you would file the motion would start in the courts or could start in the prison. And then the courts would ask the prison to give them a report on basically everything that you've done while you've been incarcerated. You would appear before the parole board. The parole board would give a recommendation back to the court system. Then ultimately, if there's a victim, the victim or victim's family, they could weigh in and decide whether they oppose or they don't oppose. The Attorney General's office will weigh in, and then the courts will make the ultimate decision. Your second part of the question, that a lot of times at the prison, right, for these guys, they have life sentences or de facto life sentences. And so currently on the books, like Michael mentioned earlier, that compassionate release was tied into medical release. And so the medical release vow was that you had to be dying pretty much.
Right.
And you had to, the Department of Corrections medical staff had to make a decision that, hey, this person is dying. They've got 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, and they would start that process. Then they would refer that to the Department of Corrections. Then the Department of Corrections, their counseling staff or treatment staff, then they would do a report. Then the report had to go to the parole board. Then the parole board had to do a report to, depending on your sentence. So there's 2 sentences, and this is quite difficult, quite lengthy, but I'll try to make it short. That the law changed in 1990. So if you were, a lot of these guys were sentenced before 1990. So the guys that were sentenced before 1990 had to go to a different process than the guys who were sentenced after 1990. And then the guys who were sentenced in 1990, if you had a life sentence, you were ineligible for the Department of Corrections to support you on a medical release unless you were dying or you went through the pardon board and the governors through a commutation or a pardon. And the guy is sentenced prior to that, they would have to go to the parole board. That's if you were parole eligible. So a lot of times the Department of Corrections, their hands were tied. And if you were identified and you had a illness where you were dying, a lot of times the process is so lengthy that you probably would die before you would get out of jail. And so your last point, your question for these guys that were influential to us, and is definitely in prison reform. I mean, part of it is that the prison, you can be so instrumental into the day-to-day operations of the prison. I think there was a movie, Shawshank's Redemption, where the guy, they didn't want him out of jail. He was too good. So a lot of times these guys is that they stop a lot of violence and a lot of BS that goes on in the jail. Right. And so it's almost like when you get to that level, it's almost damned if you do, damned if you don't, because it's like, hey, we kind of need you in here, like for these younger generations. And so it's almost like, catch-22. So a lot of these guys they're telling them, hey, just give me a couple more years, we'll get behind you, because the prison really needs guys like this inside. But a lot of these guys, like I said, they've been in jail 40 and 50 years, and they're 70, they're almost 80 years old. And it's like, when do they get to retire?
Yeah. Yeah. You hit it right on the nose. Yeah. Yes.
Sue?
Anybody else? Oh, they got.
Yeah, I have a couple things. When you say you are looking for support, I'm assuming that means contact our state representatives, our state senators, contact the governor, and express support for
Yes.
this approach. And that is clearly something that we all can do. Is
Yes.
there anything else that would be helpful?
Not at this time. We believe that just contacting your state representative, the governor's office would go a long way behind it, because, like you said, a lot of people are getting behind this bill because, like you said, they realize that when it comes to prison reform, is that this is one of the aspects of prison reform, identifying that a lot of guys who have really served their time, right, and now the sentence is becoming overkill. Right, especially for a lot of those guys who were in jail for non-violent crimes. And unfortunately, in the 80s and the 90s, I mean, we were hard on crime, right? And a lot of guys got sentenced to, for crimes that normally and today might only get them 8 or 9 years.
Right. The other thing is, Monday evening, we had an opportunity to chat with someone in the community organization around our church. And this topic came up among many other things. And her reading of it was that this would be releasing people into the community who had nowhere to go. And that that the reason it was being done was because it was too expensive to keep people incarcerated. So it was cheaper for the state to release them. So I think there is some education that needs to go on about this proposal, this bill that says every bill that is introduced or going to be dealt with has to have a fiscal note associated with it. And the fiscal note describes the cost if the bill is passed. But in a case like this, there is a contrary cost if it's not passed. And so I think there's some clarification in the communication about the context of the bill and its provisions that would garner a whole lot more support if people understood that that this is not about releasing people onto the street. We sure hope they find their way to a homeless shelter. And oh, by the way, we're doing it because it saves the state money, just as
Mhm.
We heard from someone who was aware of it without necessarily knowing a lot about it.
So I would say I don't have the statistics before me, but of course we know that as we all get older, where we're on the streets or we're incarcerated, that health insurance is more expensive for older people than it is for much younger people. But I don't think that's what's driving the bill, because without this bill, because this bill was, like I said, this bill originated out of a meeting that we had in June, and part of the project. So it wasn't initiated on a state level to say, hey, that it's costing us too much money. Although that has been a subject of discussion for the last few years all over the country about incarcerating older people because of the cost. But this bill didn't start there, right? Because if we wasn't sitting here talking about it tonight, and then we didn't start talking about this in June, I don't think the state of Delaware would have really cared one way or another, right? And then second is, part of the bill is the release is that you have to have the family support. So let's just say if this bill would pass in January, this is not a vow that's going to release all the older people in jail, and there's going to be, I gave you the statistics that there was 100 and something, almost 200 men, and all these 200 men are going to get out of jail immediately and just be on the streets. Like, there's a process to this, and you also have to have family support, right? And without that, unfortunately, that you're probably not going to get out of jail. And I mean, and a lot of these guys, when they're sitting down and probably contemplating and going through it, they're probably going to need some case management for the guys that don't have no. Because unfortunately, there's some guys in there that they have outlived their support system. Right, where their mothers died, their family members have died, either they went in jail too early, don't have children. And so some of these guys will have, but there will be a plan set up for these guys too. But a lot of these guys have family members, they have children, right? They have grandchildren, and they are very supportive of them. But without that, you really probably won't get released. So, I want to reiterate that this is not a release valve that's going to release 200 older people on the street and they're going to be homeless, so, because that would be an injustice.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so I think just making that as clear as possible in the communications would garner a lot of support. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sandy? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. Roger Reinecker and I have a friend, Patricia May, who was a counselor at Vaughan, and she ran a program called My Brother's Keeper. And that was an official mentorship program. I was just curious if you were aware of that, or I know it sounds like some of what you're talking about just takes place unofficially, but were you a part of that or aware of that program?
Yes,
Yeah,
Michael and myself, we're both a part of My Brother's Keeper, and we know Miss May very well. Yeah.
Yeah, if you mention our names to Miss May, she'll probably tell you. I mean, yeah, we actually were there when in the beginning stages of My Brother's Keeper program. I was a senior facilitator myself, along with Nick. Nick was around. So yeah, I was there with Miss May. I spent a couple years over there, and when she got the residential section of it, and the institution was pretty much against it because she was bringing people together. You know what I mean? Miss May, good people. Yeah. So yeah, we were a part of My Brother's Keeper program.
Pushback, but I know it was a wonderful program.
Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And so for a lot of these I say this with a great deal of compassion, that without these guys, and Michael probably can second this, that my incarceration, for a lot of times that these guys design treatment programs, they run treatment programs, they're instrumental in getting the younger guys in the treatment programs over the years. And without them, I probably just sat down Smyrna and watched TV the entire time, right? Because a lot of times is they don't have enough programs. Sometimes the institution doesn't support it for security reasons. And sometimes they just don't care. And so a lot of times without these guys, that many young men like myself and Michael, when we were incarcerated as young age, we wouldn't have took the initiative to change our lives, right? And so we would just sat in jail and just been older criminals, right, without their support. And for that, I think that this shows that they have made amends for their crimes because they've been influential and changed many lives over the years. And so, like, and Miss May, like a lot of the guys we were speaking about, they were instrumental along with Michael and myself in being a part of my brother's keeper and bringing in, you know, different layers from the youngest guys in their 18 to the 20s to the 30-year-old guys to the 40-year-old guys. And of course, these guys, as like Michael said, by the time we got in jail, these guys already had like 25, you know what I mean, years incarcerated. And they definitely could have took a different road or a different angle, but they chose to change people's lives.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, those guys were instrumental. But yeah. Wow. I tell you, boy, this is how God works. Miss May, Patricia May. I've ran into her a few times. She stays on my page because I'm always posting stuff, good, positive stuff that I'm doing. Spending a lot of time with my son, and she was very impactful as well. You know what I mean? Very impactful. You know, coming up. You know, trying to keep us on the right path, and she definitely stood on the lines to support and defend us against administration who automatically thought that we wouldn't make it because of the different dimensions, different religions and all that, Muslims, Christian. They didn't think we would coexist together, you know what I mean, in one building under, one banner of mentorship. I started, my group was called At War. I'm an acronym junkie. So At War was active thinkers winning against recidivism. So that was my personal group that I ran with the younger guys, just breaking that cycle, focusing on, thinking, what I mean, and making better choices and decisions and breaking that recidivism thing, man, because it was so high in Delaware. It's still high, but yeah. So, but yeah, Miss May, I never forget Miss May, and I'm sure she'll never forget us because we were instrumental in her life as well.
She was
Thanks for
definitely
all
a
the
beacon.
work you're doing too and have done in this respect. It's
Yes,
wonderful.
thank you. Miss May was
Thank you.
Miss May was definitely a beacon of hope. And I seen in the comment section, the question section, that yes, it is Senate Resolution 98, and we will be meeting Monday. Dr. Payne and Senator
ODS.
Townsend meeting with the Public Defender's Office to go over some of the language because there needs to be some tweaks to the bill before it gets to the governor. And so they'll probably get together and try to fix that this upcoming Monday.
So I think the way the process will actually work, the resolution, as I read it, was basically a commitment by the General Assembly to say, we think this needs to be explored and done, and we're committing to, exploring and trying to make reforms.
Yeah.
But the bill language still has to be developed, the details worked out.
Yeah.
Then it will get introduced and actually get a bill number at that point, and it will still have to go through the process that we've all talked about before in terms of get it going through first a committee and then a full floor vote, and that will have to take place in both the Senate and the House. I'm not sure where it will be introduced first, and before it then eventually goes to the governor. So the resolution was a good thing because it shows that the legislature is committed and is saying, yes, we want to do something, but then the devil's in the details in terms of laying it out and getting them to actually pass it.
Because like we
At
said,
the same time, Lynn, do you think it would be useful for us to register present with our legislators and the governor to say, we've seen the resolution and we are anxious for the legislature to turn this into a bill that can be approved and signed and move forward? It would seem that would be helpful. It certainly couldn't hurt. I'm thinking
It's
it might be
never
helpful.
too early to talk to the legislators about, learning more about and supporting compassionate release. A lot of them will say, well, I won't know until I see the bill because, they're not going to commit till they see it. But it's never too early to start talking with them about it. Get them thinking about it. Let them know the community cares about this. And when there is a bill, we expect them to jump on board and, tell them you hope they'll sign on as a co-sponsor. Really, start working on them early to be part of the change. I see the one labeled Mac has their hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Nick and Michael, for talking with us this evening. I'm curious to understand if anyone has interacted with the candidates for mayor of the city of Wilmington and governor of the state of Delaware, because those elections are going to happen in a little under a year from now. And I think getting some information out to those candidates and find out where the candidates stand, maybe it'll become a ballot issue. In addition to that, Laura Sturgeon happens to be my senator, and I've just contributed to her campaign. And Brian Townsend is a friend of myself and my husband, and has helped us out with some legal issues that we've had. So I guess my question really is, what is it that we can do to help you facilitate this bill? Is it other than contacting our legislatures, contacting any legislature? And the other question was, has anyone reached out to the candidates that are running for our Wilmington mayor's office and our state of Delaware governor's office?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I was just actually with Miss Velda Potter. She showed up at one of my speaking events 2 weeks ago. She showed up and she's in support of it. I really don't even know who's running against her. They're saying that the governor is supposed to be running against her. Yeah, Corny. So, and me and Corny got a decent relationship. He actually just granted me a pardon a couple of weeks ago as well. So yeah, I mean, moving forward, I believe we would get that traction. And yeah, we've been talking to those candidates. What's her name running for Bethany? She's running for governor as well, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, she actually oversee when I went for my pardon here, and she oversee all that and talked to me about different things. So I think I think we get the support with those candidates running in or coming in, with this bill. Nick, you can answer that second question, part of it.
I think that contacting your local representative and tell them that you stand behind this bill and you're in support of this bill, because the ultimate goal would be, like, because with Godspeed, we will hope to get this passed this upcoming legislative session, and get it signed into law way before the legislative session ends on June 30th. Because one of the realities is that, like I said, compassionate release is already on the books. It's just the way the law reads right now is pretty much almost impossible to get through, because you almost got to be dying, right? So there's got to be some changes, I think, to Title 11, 4217, and I think some of the parole statutes. So it's not like we're creating a new law. We're just pretty much making it pretty much fair, giving people, all a lot of these guys, all they want is an opportunity to be judged on their merits. Right. And I think that if we can get this bill passed, and like I said, I reiterate that just contacting your local representative and the governor's office and tell them as a community member that you stand behind this bill. Right. That there's community members that support it would go a long way, because, like you said, the resolution said a lot. That a lot of people stood behind this, unanimously voted in the House and the Senate. So I don't think that we would have a hard time, but just contact them to give them that little nudge, like that the community also stands behind this as well, would go a long way.
Sally?
Thanks. Just a quick question. I'm a little bit confused. There's still a medical component in the resolution. There need to be a medical issue or not?
Yeah, there's still a medical component inside of the law. Yes, there is.
But in the new bill that you guys want to see passed, is there still going to be a requirement for someone to have a medical problem in order for them to be considered for compassionate release?
Yes, but that problem will be given examples of a definition, so that we know that before the definitions was ambiguous, right? And so, like I said, it was almost like that through my experience that most of the guys is that they were on their deathbed when the Department of Corrections said, "Hey, this guy, we can release this guy," and it was pretty much a compassionate release, but a lot of guys never made it home, right? Because the process. So this pretty much is shortening the process, right? And identifying, like, for a lot of these guys is they're not on their deathbeds, but they do got a lot of chronic illnesses. You know, like Mr. Saunders, he was suffered from heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes. He was losing his eyesight, but under the compassionate release right now, he pretty much wouldn't be eligible for release, even though he's 80 something years old. Like, and it just took him to like last week to pretty much for them to release him, you know. And so it's a lot of other guys that are going blind and are dying, but they may be going blind. They may be suffering diabetes. They may have lost their leg or their arms because of diabetes, and just their quality of life is, you know, being incarcerated is just not conducive to their quality of life. And so, but under the current law is they're not eligible to be released, even if you have 40 or 50 years in.
Well, the idea that underlays that sort of is you don't get truly effective state-of-the-art medical care when you're in prison. You get what you get, but you
Yes.
don't necessarily get that which would improve your condition, extend your life, enable you to function more productively if you were to get that medical care.
Yes.
Did you think about dropping the medical provision altogether?
I think that dropping the medical, we discussed it, but dropping that condition would be a hard sell to some of the legislators and some of the people that are in support of it.
First steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other
Optimism.
questions from anyone? Well, then I'll say thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us this evening. I think we understand that we can go ahead and start now talking to our own representatives and senators about compassionate release in general. And I hope as soon as there is a bill number that you'll reach back out to us and tell us what that is so that we can go back again a second time to those representatives, senators, and others to say, okay, here it is now. We want you to, you know, sign on as a co-sponsor if you can, or at least be prepared to vote yes for it when the time comes. Sue, do you want to close us out with who is speaking next week?
Sure, but first, thank you, Nick and Michael, for being here. It's very powerful to hear the perspective of someone who has lived a circumstance, who has been part of the process, who sees the good and the bad and the opportunity, and can speak so clearly about why something like this is important and merits our support. So thank you so much for being here. This program this evening has been recorded. We are quite certain it will be viewed by any number of people after the fact. So it isn't just those of us who are here this evening. So we want to thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you guys.
to speak on something that we're very passionate about.
We can see that, and we share your desire to, in essence, rectify a wrong, put something in place that acknowledges that our criminal justice system is far from infallible. In fact, in many instances, it's far from meaningful and effective. And just because bad decisions were made 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago under bad law, doesn't mean that people's lives have to be impacted up until the day they die. So we appreciate your perspective in sharing this. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, you guys.
Next week, we are turning to a more foundational question on race. And our topic is white privilege, question mark. Is it? How have you experienced it, be you white or black? How does it manifest? What are its implications and its consequences? And how do we come to understand better the decisions we make, the positions that the beliefs that we hold, the words that we say, and how can we more meaningfully explore implicit bias, actions that we take. There's a lot of pushback typically using the term white privilege. I'm not privileged. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. I was very poor. It's an opportunity to dive into the question with some reflection and some compassion and some shared perspectives. So we hope you will join us next Thursday at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you much.
night.
Good night.
Good night.